Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Starting a new
We
week.
Yes, it is, and this is
Yeah.
going to be a interesting week. It
Yeah.
it's going to be a little. I don't usually teach on Monday mornings, so I just wanted to make sure that I had everything right. Had a couple errands I had to do earlier, luckily I
Yeah.
made it back in time. So
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Do
yep.
you know
Well,
if anybody else will join us or
I sent an email out yesterday just
Yeah, I saw
reminding
that.
everybody that, what the schedule is. So we'll find out in about 7 8 minutes or so.
Okay.
So I do appreciate you coming in a bit early because that lets me know someone is going to be here.
Right.
So,
That's what I thought
but
too.
yeah, I have uh, I've got a kind of a major push I'm going to do right after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, to try to build up the student count a little bit. Um, it's just challenging,
It is. I
just to
know. I
get
get it. Well,
it. Just
let me ask you this. If
sure.
tomorrow, do you know if anybody's coming to the night one? Because if no one's coming to the day one, but you know that people are coming to the night one, I'll just switch to the night one, or I can just come another time because it
Don't
seems
know.
like they're offered often, so it doesn't matter to me.
Well, I assumed this morning that Myra will be here,
Okay.
um, because she missed a couple last week because of the birth of a granddaughter and or grandson, I think it was. But and then I have a new student that signed up, so I'm not quite sure when she is going to be starting. So she was included in the email that I sent out yesterday. So um,
Okay.
it's not a problem. I have it, I have the time scheduled. If as long as one person shows up, I teach it. If nobody shows up, then I don't. But I'll give them to about 15 minutes
But I
for
am
that.
very flexible, and honestly, like, just 'cause right last week I did 3 modules, and it was a lot, for me. Well,
It is.
thank God that some of the units are a little bit easier, but I tried to read this one last night ahead of time, and I was like, "Wow, there's a lot into this," and, like, all these terms.
Yes.
So it's gonna take a while for me to absorb it, and, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if I took module 4 a different time, even if it's further down the line.
Yep. Now, were you speaking about module 3 being difficult
Well,
or
I
module
just think
4?
there was a lot to Yeah, module 3, I felt like there was a lot of things about easements, different types of
Oh,
easements,
okay.
and then all these fee simple, absolute, feasible, determinable, like, what?
Yep.
So
Yeah, defeasible is, and we're going to get into that. Fee simple defeasible means there's a restriction,
yeah,
and it will be either determinable or condition subsequent, which kind of determines and then you're probably talking about a reversionary estate or remainder man, and
yes.
yes, and it'll make sense. It will.
Yeah.
It generally
It
will.
does, it's just trying to keep them all straight, and
Yeah,
there's just so much that'll go into my brain with all my other stuff in the world that I deal with, and I'm like, "Okay." It's just gonna take time to know the differences.
and the important thing is, you'll need to know it for the test, but on a practical basis, it's not something you're gonna. I mean, you'll know it in terms of your practice of real estate, but it's not something you're going to be dealing with. It's more
Yeah,
something that title companies deal with, and specifically real estate attorneys, because it
right.
deals with the legal aspects of what happens if this happens, types of thing.
Exactly.
You know,
Yes, yes.
and so in that regard, as long as you get a good understanding of it, you don't need to know it like an attorney would know it, because
Okay.
you're not going to give advice um, on how to vest, and how to take ownership, or how to, deal with a particular restriction. That's something more along the lines that a real estate attorney is going to address in a potential transaction.
Right. And it would be the buyer's attorney that would, that I would refer them to, correct?
Absolute, absolute. Well, it depends on the circumstances. If there's a title issue, then obviously the seller would need, you know, to address that title issue, or if there's a restriction that needs to be removed, or it's unenforceable because it violates law, or it's a stale restriction, and those types of things. You would give them the advice that they would need to either seek an attorney or consult with their attorney in regards to those issues. You're not going to say, well, you don't need to worry about that restriction because it's not enforceable, because you just say, well, I'm not going to give you legal advice because I'm not an attorney. So you really should speak to your attorney in regards to that to ensure that the transaction can continue to go forward.
And I love that. That's why I'm not an attorney.
Yep, yep, yep. And I mean, there are people that are licensees that are attorneys as well, and it's relatively rare because like an attorney can't practice real estate. you know they can do what they do within the purvey of the law. They make contracts, etc., but they can't negotiate per se the way that a real estate agent or licensee can negotiate.
Hmm.
So it's I've had over the years probably 5 attorneys in my licensing classes. Fascinating, because none of them came from a real estate perspective. Um, Two were bankruptcy attorneys, so they had dealt with real estate in law school, but after that they really they didn't never dealt with it other than you know how bankruptcy law pertained to real property, which is a very niche and very specific area. Another one was she had been a utility attorney, and she was actually joining a family business, a winery, actually, to be the chief legal counsel for the winery. And but she had some very fascinating stories about like right of ways and electromagnetic pulse lawsuits, because of
Hmm.
course people say, oh, I'm next to this transformer and it gave me cancer, so they sue the electrical utility. And so she was the utilities main chief counsel in defending against those types of suits. So she had a different perspective that
Now, do these
was appreciated.
attorneys get licensed, or they can't get licensed? They're just for
No,
the information.
no, they get licensed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Now they can. I and what was interesting is in the state that I was teaching in, they have 4 separate courses. They have real estate principles and practice, which is a 40-hour course. They have real estate law, which is a 40-hour course. And then at the time, they had real estate appraisal, which was a 20-hour course, and real estate finance, which was a 20-hour course. So it was 120 hours in total. And if they came in with a law license, they could petition the state bar, for a exemption or a waiver for the real estate law portion, because it was assumed, hey, they're a licensed practicing attorney, they should know that. But what most of them said was they're coming from an area where they never really dealt with real estate, so they wanted to sit through it. So that was interesting, teaching real
Yeah.
estate law to attorneys. So
Hmm.
it was fun, and we had good discussions, and those were in person classes. I'd say probably in the mid 2000s, like '07, '08, '09. So there was also some discussion on what was going on topically, in the real estate industry, because there was a dramatic downturn um,
Yeah.
that happened, and it was built up, and Usually, these business cycles, they tend to happen in a 20-25 year period. So that being said, we're pretty close
Yeah.
to the next one. And it's every time, like I've gone through three. So I'll probably go through another one or two more before I leave this earth. And it's every time they say this will never happen again. We're going to pass laws and regulations to ensure that it doesn't happen again, and it always happens
And it
again.
does. Yeah.
And it does. 89 was a big one. That was when they passed FREA, the Financial Institution Reform Recovery Enforcement Act, and it tightened up regulations in regards to appraisal. And what had happened prior to that is basically in almost a 10-year period of time, half of the country's thrift institutions went under. And it got so bad, 50% just in essence went bankrupt. And the FSLIC, the Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation, which was a sister company to the FDIC, they went broke. They were
Yeah.
paying off so many claims they went broke. So they merged the FSLIC into the FDIC, got rid of it, and changed the controlling regulations. I was working for a institution that was what grew. I think we almost tripled in size in about a 3 or 4 year period of time, just because of they were a healthy thrift, very healthy, and they had a federal charter, and they were just absorbing branch systems just almost
Mm.
every other month. It was a new acquisition.
Wow.
And yeah, and I mean we still have those going on, but they're a little spotty, and they're not at the level that it was like that. But then you know we recovered, and the
Right.
institution moved forward, and then things started to get a little dicey in 2006, and they said, "Oh no, this is just related to subprime," which were those riskier mortgage lending banks and companies. And there was a couple major subprime bankruptcies in December of '06. Um, and they said, this isn't going to fall over into the prime lending area, and it did. It did.
Yeah.
um, in '07, and then it just really, that fall, in essence, there was no secondary market. You know how
Right.
banks and lenders would make a loan, and then they'd close the loan and then sell it on the secondary market. So there was
Right.
money. Nobody was buying. It just stopped, just like you turn the faucet off. And so companies started falling like dominoes. And it was an interesting time. And then
It's
you know
amazing how it recovered. So,
it recovered. And you know in regards to, in both times, in both situations, real estate agents still sold homes. They still made a living. Now they pivoted a little bit, especially in '08. And I have a friend, and was just talking to him about it when I was up in Ohio. He's now president of a commercial division of a large multi-state brokerage. And but he had just started as an agent in like '05. And he was doing well in residential, and then all of a sudden, you know the market changed dramatically fast. And so he pivoted to property management. And why? Because there were so many foreclosures that these banks had these huge real estate owned portfolios that they really couldn't sell, because it would flood the market. And by flooding the market, by putting all these foreclosures out there, would drive prices down even lower than what they were. So they had to hold on to these assets and kind of roll them out into the market on an orderly basis, which took a few years. So in the meantime, they had to do something with them. So they
Yeah.
rented them out. So that was a huge boon for people in the property management business, and that's also what his entree was into commercial, because commercial was taking a hit as well. And so as such, he you know made that pivot, and it's been smiling ever since.
Yeah, it's
Smiling ever
interesting, and
since.
thank God you can make that pivot, to keep going and
Yes.
yeah.
Well, and I Lorena, I bought my first house in 1982, and I was 3 years out of college. I was married and had a child, and this was a large national builder developer at the time called Ryan Homes. I think they're still around, but they're not nearly as big as they were. But they had their own financing arm, and this was a brand new home, and we bought it with an FHA. At the time, it was a first time home buyer type of loan, because I was a first time home buyer. And um, it was a long process. It took 6 months for a final approval, because the lender, Ryan Financial Services, approved us within like 30 days, but then they had to send it to the local FHA office, literally send it by mail, because this was
Yeah. Back then,
82.
yeah.
Yep. And it took them a few months because it was the government. And then so they finally, and during this time interest rates floated. And I don't know if historically you remember what was going on in 82, but 1980 President Reagan was elected, and he changed what was a fairly regulated economy. We had regulated trucking, regulated airlines, regulated banking, and just removed a lot of the constraints. So we had a period of, when people say, oh my God, 8% inflation or 8% interest rates, I closed at 15.5% on my
Oh,
first
wow.
mortgage. And that was a good rate at the time. That was because it hit, first mortgage rates that year hit 21%.
Oh my gosh.
And
I
and,
didn't
and that
realize back then that
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So obviously we refinanced it. Rates kind of settled down after about a year and a half to 2 years to the eights, but it was like whoosh, you know. And the point that I'm making is I still bought a house, literally
Right.
at 15.5%. It was a lot less house than
Yeah.
I
And of
could have
course,
bought
it's
at
not the
8%.
prices of today, but still.
Well, I mean, it was like, I think the purchase price was like 45,000,
Yeah.
which was low in
Right.
comparison to today, but still that was, was a stretch for us. So the point is that regardless of interest rates, regardless of the economic conditions, people have to have some place to live. And
Yeah.
if you're flexible and diligent and work and understand the market and kind of see the trends, you can pivot when you need to pivot and pivot back when you need to. and
Right.
and and just what was bad is there was a lot of people in the real estate industry in like '03, '04, '05, because literally you could just get a license and just stand there on a street corner and get listings and make sales, because you didn't have to sell. You didn't have to work real hard, because there was so much. The subprime industry had exploded, and so people who normally weren't in the market were all of a sudden in the market, which caused pricing to continue to go up artificially. And even the government, um, FH, both FHA and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they dug really deep, because it was the government's intent to have homeownership and increase it. And quite frankly, all of those things contributed to people buying homes that shouldn't have bought them at the time they bought them.
Yeah.
And So hopefully we've somewhat learned our lessons, but I'm seeing little snippets in the economy that suggest that perhaps we have not.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
there's one lender that has um, a bridge purchase loan. They they will basically um, it's kind of like
Like
a
construction,
no
if
payment,
people
no interest. Well, you have a house that you want to sell, and you want to sell the home because that's where your down payment is coming from for your new house. Well, they'll go ahead and give you a loan for the equity in there, so you can put that down on the new home, and then
but
they'll do the
the
new loan
interest
as
is
well.
horrible, I'm sure.
It's yeah, and it's they said, oh, the interest is not horrible, but it's not great either. To me, they did that in the 80s. It didn't work out well. Because what happens if you can't sell your home? Well, now you're stuck with two mortgages,
Yeah.
and, or you can't sell. And they say, oh, no, it's safe because it's an AI enabled. Well, AI isn't the end all and be all. It makes mistakes too. It's, well, we'll see where it goes. But
Yeah.
I'm seeing this is a relatively new thing, and as such, that's it's just one of those things that go, oh, okay, so we're starting to travel down that path again, and
Yeah,
we'll,
it's dangerous if people don't understand fully what they're getting into.
yep, yep, and to rely on software to make decisions, and I think we had that discussion in the last class. AI is really not good at ethical and moral decisions. You need a human for that. And you know in fact, it's not good at all in ethical and moral decisions. It doesn't have an ethical perspective or a moral perspective. It only has what has been programmed into it, at least so far. So,
Yeah.
well, it looks like it's just going to be you and I,
Okay.
uh,
It's
which
okay.
is okay. Which is
Yeah.
okay. And I had at one time thought, well, maybe I shouldn't even schedule classes during the week of Christmas because people are really, really
Busy or
busy.
yeah.
And I actually have I teach ESL,
Oh,
business
okay.
English, and I have a client, um, and I only do like I have like three clients right now that do a couple classes a week. But she was supposed to do the class on Saturday, and um, she had to reschedule, and she says, "I'll do it on the 24th, at 8:30." I said, "Okay, just so you remember, that's Christmas Eve. I don't have a problem with that, but you know, because she had to reschedule from Saturday because she had to do Christmas shopping. She was in
Oh.
Medellin, Colombia.
Oh,
So, um, and so she hasn't responded back yet that it's not going to happen, but
right.
and it's only an hour. So
I know, but still, it would be really respectful if you knew, so you can plan around it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, we don't really celebrate the holidays on the holiday days. Just
Yeah.
for I'm a Jehovah Witness, so Christmas is not a big deal, not a big
Yeah.
day. We
Yeah.
give gifts all year round, and still go to church.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, but you know, uh, she might be. I mean,
Right, right.
Colombia is kind of like here in Puerto Rico, about 98% Catholic.
Right.
And here it's big, and I'm sure it is there too, because in Latin America, um, Christmas season starts like December 20th and goes to like January 9th.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know,
it's a big celebration. Yeah.
it's Los Reyes Magos, the Three Kings,
Yep.
and it's a big excuse to party and to drink and
Yeah, they
visit family
celebrate
and
it
stuff.
here, in the communities where it's, predominantly Hispanic, and it's all over the news and everything, and, yeah, I mean, it looks like a great celebration. It's great that they can celebrate their traditions here, you know?
Yes, Yeah, and it's good because we forget sometimes that America is a melting pot.
That's right.
There is a
Yeah.
yeah, everybody there except for a very select few are immigrants,
Right.
or descendants of immigrants. So,
Oh,
but let's go ahead and we'll get started here. This is an interesting module because this deals specifically with your ownership interest in real property, and you have this we'll call it a bundle of rights because there's physical characteristics in there, and these are legal characteristics, what you have legally, what you can do with the property, how you can dispose of it, the exclusionary options that you have. You can exclude the general public. You see the no trespassing signs, etc. Now, you had mentioned the word fee simple absolute. That is the highest level of ownership that we can have in real property. However, even if we are vested or take ownership in a fee simple absolute level, there's still going to be restrictions. There's definitely governmental restrictions, public restrictions, because we have certain zoning ordinances and building codes and health and safety and welfare that's out there. And so those types of things are things that we absolutely, we got to adhere to them. Yeah, we own our property. We may own it free and clear, but still, if the government says you got to pay real estate tax, you got to pay real estate tax. If the government says you have to allow the fire and police in cases of an emergency, you got to allow fire and police. If the government says you can build, but you have to adhere to this particular building code, we have to adhere to that particular building code. So even though we may own it at the highest level of ownership, there is public restrictions to it, and there is private restrictions as well. If you have ever lived in a subdivision that was subject to a homeowners association, you know that those private restrictions can be pretty specific, pretty prescriptive. They can they can tell you what kind of vegetation you can have in your yard. They can tell you what kind of vehicles can be parked in your driveway. They can tell you what kind of fence you have or a pool. We kind of had that discussion before. Those aren't public restrictions. Those are private restrictions, and you agree to those when the deed, if the deed contains those restrictions, by taking the deed. And typically, if it's a homeowners association, the deed will reference the homeowners association, and that will run with the deed. And remember, we had a discussion about when it would not be applicable, as if the association somehow became defunct, and then those restrictions would perhaps go away unless they were in the deed itself.
right.
And sometimes you can have private restrictions that run with the deed, and some of those are easements. You can have, let's assume, Lorena, that there's a lot behind yours, and this is a landlocked lot, and the only way that you can get to this lot is through your property because there's no access to the street otherwise. So that particular lot will be granted an easement to use your driveway, if you will, or your property for ingress and egress to the street. That would be an easement. Um, your property would be the servient tenement in that easement because you're basically serving the other property, and their property would be the dominant tenement because they're the ones placing the easement on there, and it would, if it's not put onto the deed, a court would do that, because it would be an easement by necessity. Again, a property cannot be landlocked. It has to do it. Now those easements can go away over a period of time, because let's assume on the other side of that lot behind you, they build a road. Well, now they don't need to use yours. So that easement on your property can be terminated. Okay.
Yes.
Or if for some reason it's abandoned, it would be terminated. And or let's say you bought the lot behind you and merged it. Now there is no dominant or servient tenement. There's just one giant lot. You own
Right.
both. So that would terminate that easement as well. So we'll get in, and hopefully that kind of makes a little more sense over some of
Oh,
the
it
things that.
does. Yeah. And all of
that
it did make sense. It's just trying to keep them all straight.
yep, yep. And I know, and it can be challenging, over a particular period of time, just to remember them. And again, the best thing, as I'm sure you tell your folks taking certification test and license test,
Yes.
is study, cram, read, reread, test, reread, and then take the test right away. You know,
Yeah, but
while
also
it's
to keep up with the content because you can't learn this all like 2 weeks prior. You have to keep it up.
no,
You have to keep up with it. Yeah.
no. I feel bad for those people taking a 40-hour class and then having to take the test, because literally when I taught in Michigan, it was a 40-hour live class, and it was all week. It
Yeah.
was, you know, 8 hours a day for 5 days, and literally they would walk out of the class. We're talking exhausting. For them, it was probably even more exhausting because they had to listen to me and try to keep up. And really, at night, after they were done with the class, the last thing that they wanted to do was read, because
Right.
they had dealt with 8 hours of real estate education all day long. So you're absolutely right. And if it's, but they got to do it. If you can read before and then read after, it's the best
It is, and
process to
like
do
you
that.
said at the last class, if you read it again, everything starts to come together like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what that means." And, it starts to sink in, and then it's just a matter of kind of memorizing terms and everything. So,
Yep, yep. And
it's definitely doable.
it is definitely doable. And I've had, with these smaller classes, I think we're having a little bit of a better impact, um, in terms of pass rates, um, just because they're that you have the ability where you're not so concerned about asking questions. In a class of 25 or 30, yeah,
Right.
it's tougher, and especially in some classes, people will tend to dominate the questions in the discussion and conversation, um, just because that's the nature of their personality. And as such, someone else may let them ask the questions, but they may not get the questions that they wanted specifically to be asked. And
Right.
sometimes you have to just kind of keep on task. So one of the things that we're going to cover, in addition to easements, we're going to talk about, when people hear the word estate, they think of this big mansion on a hill. But in real estate, what an estate is your level of ownership. Your level of ownership, or you can have a leasehold estate. You go, wait a second, a lease is no ownership at all. No, there is no ownership, but there is possession, and that's one of those bundle of rights. So it's a level of estate. It's not ownership, but it is possession for a specific period of time. Okay, so we're going to talk about those different levels, because the levels can have certain restrictions. Remember, you mentioned fee simple to feasible. That's where something is restricted, if you will. So
Okay.
we're also going to talk about liens and encumbrances. And a lien is a financial charge that we're going to get into in a little greater detail, a lot greater detail actually. But an encumbrance is not a financial charge, but is still it's a on the title of the property, on the deed of the property. What an example of an encumbrance is an easement. One example. A lien is an encumbrance as well. So all liens are encumbrances, but not all encumbrances are liens. I want to make sure
Okay.
that that makes sense, because you can have an encumbrance that's not a financial charge. It could be an easement or other type of restriction, but all liens, real property liens, are an encumbrance on the property. They
Okay.
tie it up.
Liens are tied into financials. Like if someone um got a home equity line of credit on their house,
Yes,
then that would be a lien.
that is correct. Or a mortgage, that would be a lien.
Okay.
Or if they get sued in a court and lose, and that would be a lien, because that would be a general judgment lien, and a judgment lien through the courts is a general lien, so it applies to real and personal property, and it's not specific. It applies to anything that you own, quite frankly. And so that's why they do searches of the court records, not just pertaining to the property, but also to the person. Because what could happen is, let's say that you're buying a home and you have this outstanding judgment lien. Well, the minute that you take ownership of the home, the second that you take ownership of the home, that judgment lien is attached to that real property.
Yes.
And
So do
so
you
a
have to sell it or uh
well,
at a certain
no,
point?
a bank is not going to loan money when there's an outstanding general judgment lien, because they're going to be in second position automatically. the
Okay.
the the mortgage, if let's say that you're buying a home and you're getting a mortgage to facilitate the purchase, but you have a general judgment lien. Well, that general judgment lien is going to have a higher priority than the mortgage, because it's going to attach immediately as far as when ownership is transferred to you. And so
Okay.
that means that if that house was foreclosed on, um, the lien gets paid first. That general judgment lien gets paid first. The mortgage gets paid second. That's not a position lenders want to be in. So they want all liens cleared before the purchase transaction happens. And
It's
sometimes it
like
can happen.
a personal story. When so my father passed away first, then my mother just passed away, like, coming up on 5 years. Now, my mom never left a will. We tried to talk about it, like, "What do you wanna do?" and whatever, and I remember my mom saying, "Well, you have a house. I'd like for this house to be left to your brother." "Okay." And so when she did pass, I was honest and I told the realtor, not the realtor, I'm sorry, the attorney. I said, my mom really wants for my brother to own the house and everything. And she's like, "Oh, wow, that's really generous of you." So yeah, yeah, yeah. And I regret it now, of course. It was just a stupid thing to do. But when I did it, my brother, being a knucklehead that he is, we had to go through the probate and the fees that the attorney was, and I was generous enough to like say to my brother, "I'll pay half, you pay half." You know, "Hey, I'm giving you the house, you should pay the whole thing, right?" But no.
Yeah.
And not only did he, uh was okay with me paying half, but he was, like, very, nonchalant and hesitant to, like, pay his half. And so I got frustrated one day and I mentioned it to the attorney and she goes, "You could put a lien on the house." Of course, I was just like, "Oh, no, 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 no. He's gonna pay whatever." But I just wonder how that works because then what? She wouldn't get paid? And she would just only get paid if he tried to get a loan?
Or well, if a lien is on the home, they can sue to perfect the lien to force the sale of the property to pay off the lien, and thus, in
Okay.
essence, foreclose on it. So
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, my mother would never have wanted that, of course. So,
Right,
you know,
right, and and how your mom passed, she passed intestate without a will, and so basically, was it just you and your brother
it
as
was
far
just me
as
and my brother.
the
Yeah.
only? Yep. So basically, you guys inherited it 50-50. And
Yeah.
it passed to you through the laws of succession in the state.
Yeah.
Because if you die without a will, the state has legislation that basically deals with how you dispose of assets in an estate, and the fact that that your mom still had assets when she passed, they were going to pass. If neither one of you did anything, you were going to get half, he was going to get half.
Yeah.
Which can be kind of messy. If
Yeah. I mean,
it doesn't not.
yeah, I just wasn't thinking of future. So my brother is not married, and I didn't think at that point because already we entered our 50s that it was ever going to happen. So I always thought, well, no big deal because if he passes, it just goes to me. But what
He
ended
got
up happening,
married.
yeah, so he didn't get married, but he did find somebody that, they kept discussing marriage, and I freaked out. Because I'm
Well,
like, "Well, hold on," and, without even saying much to her, I was just thinking, like, "What?" And I tried to get a hold of him, and I said, "Listen, I left you my half, but I want that back. That was mom and dad's house. That should go back to me." "Well, you're not gonna leave me anything if you end up dying first." But, it's
well,
different with me. I have a family, you know?
I know, and the problem is to go back and recoup that, you're not going to get it.
Well,
I'm
thank God they're not talking about marriage anymore. So, like, if
Yeah.
should he pass right now or anytime, as long as they don't get married, I would imagine that goes to me.
It Yeah, unless he has children that
He
pop up.
doesn't. He
Okay.
doesn't have children.
Okay. The only other thing that could happen, and again, I am not an attorney, so you would need
Right,
to
right.
speak to an attorney, is if he puts her on the deed, gives her deeds a specific um, amount of ownership
Yeah.
on the
I've
property.
been chasing this for years now, and like we've come to the conclusion that's not going to happen.
Okay.
She ended up so she's actually a widow, and her husband died really early, and yeah, they didn't have children. And so, she meets my brother, and like total like sparks flying saying, "Oh, we're going to get married, whatever." And I was just freaking out. But then, of course, things started to calm down a little bit. She lives in that house. Um and she basically pays nothing. She sold her house, made money. It's in a bank, and that's only for her. And that money, if she were to pass, she has a will that it goes to her sisters. So I said to my brother, "Wake up! Do you see what's happening here?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." And okay. So I said to him, like, we need to see an attorney. We need to figure some stuff out. So, like, learning stuff from your class, especially the other chapters or whatever, it looks like if they ever did get married, and even if we had a will, she would still get a third. She could fight for a third if she wanted to.
Hmm. Yep. Because here's what happens. She has the right to elect against the bill
Yeah,
if she's married to him.
if she's married. But right now they're not
Yes.
married. So I don't know. Like, I went to an attorney, but I ended up getting a paralegal to talk to. And I think he gave me some inaccurate information. So he said to me, well, the house was previously your parents. Even if she came into a marriage with him, she never really had any part of ownership into the house. So even though they're like they get married, if your brother were to die, she really doesn't have a part of it. She could fight for it and get something, but technically she shouldn't. And I thought, oh wow. But I under this, what
Well, unless the state of Connecticut has laws that specifically say that,
I didn't see anything online. I researched
Yeah.
it. I didn't see anything. So
Yeah, I
I
mean, if
read that
you
if they get married, she can, if the will, even if he made a will, then and left everything to me, then she could fight for a
mhm,
third and she would win.
it's called the spousal right of election,
Right.
and it's why, remember we talked, it's why Connecticut doesn't have dower or curtsy, which are common law, um, future interest of a spouse in their spouse's property when they die. And it's for specifically those situations where you can't disinherit your spouse. You can, but they, either dower or curtsy will give them an interest in the property when they're dead, or they can elect against the will. And in Connecticut, this is in the 1800s, they passed legislation that basically gives the spouse the interest in their.
Yeah. So for me, like I'm not trying to be greedy, but here's the deal. She
It's a
sold her house. She made, I don't know, maybe 150,000, and that's her money, and her money goes to her sisters. My
Yep.
brother, she moves in, she's not paying a mortgage. She barely pays anything. It like very like no, nothing almost. You know, she the money that she makes, which she doesn't make a lot, it goes to herself. So my brother's, I tried to talk to him about it. I'm like, do you think that's fair or whatever? I'm trying not to get too involved, but I also want to make sure that he understands, like, what's fair is fair. But whatever, I stay out of that. But why would she think that she would have any right to the house that my parents worked so hard for? It's just beyond me. So, stupid me, because I didn't think things through and my mother would never have wanted that, right? She would never have wanted for, if my brother ends up passing, that like things will go to this person who essentially is a stranger, you
Yeah,
know?
she would want the house to stay within the family, and
Right.
probably what, yeah, now what you should have done is or had the attorney put a deed restriction on that to, you know,
Yes. Is it too late? I don't think it would be too late if I
well,
could
you
figure s
can't. You
yeah.
don't have an ownership in the house anymore.
No, but, like, I am talking to my brother, and he agreed to go to the attorney and figure something out. So he's on
Okay.
board with
Okay.
that. So
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, I was reading, like, in this chapter, I think it was, something where, okay, ownership of the house is fully yours, but upon your passing, it goes to, whatever, like
Yeah,
me.
you can have well, it's a survivorship deed. You
Yeah.
you would have it, go to you or your heirs,
Yeah. So
you know.
that's what I'm looking at to look
Yeah.
into, like, it.
And certainly, because he won't care because he'll be gone, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But she might put up a little tussle because
Yeah. What
that's her.
he said to me is, "Yeah, I agree. Everything should go to you. However, you can't just leave her in the dark." And I said, "No, I would never do that. I'm not that kind of a person." But also, she's got money in the bank. I
She can
I
go buy
even said to her, like,
buy something.
yeah, why don't you go get yourself a
Yeah,
condo?"
and
Or I tried to tell her not to sell her house. I said, "Rent it out."
yeah, yeah, because
She
it would
didn't
only go
listen to
up in
me.
value. Yeah,
Yeah, she didn't
I
listen to
I
me.
I take it she has not done things to ingratiate herself to the rest of the
No.
family.
No, and so, she puts herself in this position,
Yeah,
and I don't wanna be the bad person, but, she's not very she's not educating herself on what would be in her best interest. Right now, what she sees is, I have money in the bank, it's growing, and I'm also living for free in a house, and so I can get my nails done. You could see how frustrated I
sure.
am.
I would suspect she's probably banking a certain amount of her money as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Since she essentially has no expenses. You
exactly,
know,
exactly. She agreed to pay half of the property taxes, um, you know, s which she should pay all of it in my opinion, but that's I keep out of it.
I know.
So they go half and half on the property taxes, and then she contributes $400 a month so that utilities and stuff. Their electric bill alone is like $600 a month.
What?
Yeah.
How
Because
big of a house is it?
it's not even that big, they're just wasteful. So they have, the central air, central heat the central heat runs off of electric. She makes no conservation efforts to make sure the house is, like, decent, but not, yeah, they just I they run things all the time. Air conditioning in the summer is the worst. They like constant. I'm like, "Aren't you cold in here?" "No, I this is how we like it," whatever. They don't conserve.
Wow.
Whatever. Meantime, I'm
Wow.
like, "Everybody put a coat on, put a sweater on,"
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
"It's okay,
I
it's not
have
that hot."
we have one, I have a split air conditioner in our bedroom, and there is no air conditioner in the rest of the house. And I've ran it 3 times,
Yeah,
no more than an hour each time
yeah,
in the past year.
yeah,
And it's just, and our electric bill is still, 150, 160 a month.
yeah.
We run fans all the time. I got a fan running on me right now,
Oh
but
yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
yeah, we do what we got to do and try to keep track of. That's what we've done. And my husband and I have been very successful because we really we have a family of four. So, and my daughter's going to PA school and everything. It's, we have a lot of expenses, but we also, do our best to conserve and everything. And and the other part of it is she would drive that house to the ground. She doesn't, she's got 2 dogs. You go in there, there's, like, hair everywhere. I love dogs. I have a dog. He sheds a lot, whatever, but I keep up with
yeah,
so, like, and then, when they have something going wrong, it's like, "Oh my god, well, we don't have enough money to s" do yes, you
you got
do. You exactly.
150,000 in the bank.
Yeah, and she's not touching that.
you know,
But, you could see my frustration.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I take it your brother doesn't have a lot of money
Well,
coming in.
he earns plenty. He's
Oh,
stingy.
okay,
He's very stingy.
okay.
I think he's a truck driver, and I think he was
Well,
just fine before. He's paying all the expenses because
yeah.
with her contributing only $400, there's no way they would make ends meet. He pays all the homeowner's insurance, everything. He pays everything.
Wow.
So I don't even know what the she
Well,
should just
he's
live in her house, and he should live in his,
yeah,
and
he wants a companion,
yeah, yeah.
So that's easy. And how old is he?
He's a little older than me, so he's 53. He just turned 53.
Okay, so he's just starting to maybe feel or face his mortality a little bit, which is why
Yeah.
he's perhaps open. Because
Yes.
sometimes they say, nothing's going to happen. You don't need to worry about that. Oh, yeah,
Oh, no,
that's
he knows, and he agrees with me. He's like, "Yeah," he's just not, proactive. He's not one of those proactive people. So there comes me, like, with the little push. "Okay, I made an appointment with the attorney. Can you make it?" "Well, I don't know. I'm gonna try," because he's a truck driver. He doesn't have a set schedule. Sometimes he's in Wisconsin, and
oh,
some
he's over the road.
he's over the road, yeah. So
Okay,
he's gone for days. But, I said, "You have to try to make sure you're home and I tried to talk to the attorney. Is there any way Fridays work for us?" "No, we go to court on Fridays," so I'm just trying to get this done, just have it so that it's settled and,
yep.
but
Well,
yeah. So all
good
of this
luck.
sounds very interesting to me, and I'm very, like, I love trying to educate myself as much as possible of what possibilities there are, and
Well,
um
and this chapter and probably a couple others are really speak to your particular situation
yeah.
and you can yeah, I mean, I don't know why that unless there's something specific to Connecticut, I don't know why the paralegal would say, oh, she doesn't have any interest in it.
Yeah.
not,
I
it's not a
I
present interest, it's a future interest.
yeah, I was
And
very shocked when I started doing research, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, this paralegal gave me the wrong information unless, there's something I'm not reading because 'cause I'm not finding what he said." So,
yeah, yeah, well, one of the things that got me into real estate was I bought a house from a builder, and I didn't do my due diligence, and it ended up costing me over $100,000.
oh, yeah.
And 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 we went to court, and after about $9,000 in legal fees, we most of them for, we were literally 8 hours in a trial in court. you know the cost for an attorney is a whole lot different in court than it is outside of court. And anyways, we won,
Oh,
but still
good.
lost. I mean, yeah, I mean, we won, and it was, but the entire process spurred a huge, um, thirst for education in real estate, because I went to different attorneys and I knew more about real estate than they did. I know this shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And they should really know. And so we finally found, specific real estate attorneys, and and there was one that was more of a research person, and then, the one that represented us in court was the litigator. So they kind of divvied up their duties that way. But, you know when I say you need a real estate attorney, it isn't necessarily a, just like a doctor can do anything. They can do heart surgery, I suppose, on you, but you don't want them to,
Yeah.
unless they're a cardiac surgeon. Likewise, a an attorney can do, anything within the bounds of the law, but, they tend to have specializations, unless it's relatively simple. What you're looking for, I think, is relatively simple. They could just, write up a survivorship deed and name you as you or your heirs as that. And that's not legal advice. It's just general
Right.
advice. If you were buying a property with a co-investor, if something happened to you, you don't want your share to go to that co-investor. You want it to go to your heirs, because
Yeah.
it's an investment. You know, if the co-investor happens to be family, then that's something. But, you know, um, you want, just like if you're investing money in stocks and bonds, if something happens to you, you want it to go to your family. You don't want it to go to the person you're jointly investing it with, not necessarily. So, and that's what, the kind of the situation that you got here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a, you know, and typically when you run into clients that are like this, because you could have a couple say, well, we want to buy a house, or whatever, or we want to sell this house, but if they're not married, that changes the dynamics quite a bit. i've I've seen situations where, you know in a long-term relationship, I'm talking 20, 25, 30 years, if they're not married, typically one of the couple, one part of the couple has ownership of the property. So what does the other person have? Nothing,
Yeah.
literally nothing. And, you know, it's good that she has that bank account, but, if she didn't, what ownership interest would she have? What would she get if something happened to him? The answer is nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. You know, unless she was married. And quite honestly, that's why I think we had the Equality in Marriage Act passed, to allow, same-sex marriages, because it had to do with money. It had to do
Right.
with law and inheritances, and things such as that. And, you know, so
Yeah, it makes sense.
yeah. So I just wanted we talked about that. We talked about the limitations that you have you know, on the private property, and I assume, you have children,
Yes.
And older children, because one is in PA school, so she has to be probably in her 20s,
She's
I assume,
23. Yep.
23. So she must have just graduated with her 4 year and is doing her 2 year PA program. And then she'll probably, I think as part of that, they do a little bit of a residency, don't they?
They do. It's called,
The
yeah,
second,
it's a didactic year where they,
yep, that's their second year, I think, right?
yes,
Yep. And uh, then they go out and take the exam and practice,
that's
you know,
right. Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
they
she's racked
do.
up a lot of student loan debt because it's expensive. It's like becoming a doctor almost.
It is. My oldest son is a dentist, so he went to Eastern Michigan University for his undergrad, but he went to the University of Detroit Mercy for dental school. Ugh. So when he graduated, he had a mortgage,
Yeah.
in essence, and that was years ago. He's an endodontist now, and he's doing well,
Awesome.
but it was tough,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's another thing that for kids to now go to college. My daughter finished with a bachelor's in neuroscience, but there's really no jobs in that. And she's done a number of different things, and now she's in Washington D.C., which is a pretty expensive place to live.
Yes.
Um, and like, and her boyfriend just graduated from law school and passed the bar, and so now he's got a started, I think, last week on his job and working for. He's a patent attorney, which
Okay.
is a unique subset. When we talk about specializations, that's a really specialized thing. 'Cause so he's working for the U.S. Patent Office, which is great training for him. Great training. So, but yeah, you have to plan. And this house that your brother has, if he has no heirs, you're it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to go to you or your kids. And so
Yeah.
you might want to speak to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Hopefully,
but
I'll get that all straightened out soon. Our appointment with the attorney is supposed to be in January, so let's see what happens.
oh,
You know,
okay. Well,
it's
good
just been
good
some
luck.
looming for years, and thinking, "What am I doing? Like, what is he gonna do?" And talking to him and saying, "Look, do you understand where we're at here?" And what the and finally he's come around. He's like, "Yes, I do see it, and yeah, we do need to
Okay.
get this straightened out." So thank God. I
Well, and
prayed
and
a
and
lot
he needs
too.
to plan for his retirement as well, because he's not going
Yeah.
to be able to drive forever. you
Nope.
know
Yeah.
and
It definitely is not a pro health kind of job, you're stopping and getting like fast food and because that's what you can get, and it has a huge impact on his health, I think.
Now, is he a owner operator, or does he work for a company?
No, he works for a company.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there could be a retirement plan of some sort in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, but I mean that's something, and the house is, you know, and who knows, the relationship may not
It may
last.
not. Yeah.
you
It
know,
may not. Yeah.
but it could. It,
Yeah.
it just is just different.
Well,
So
she also, because her husband passed in 2022. Um, the biggest grace from God was that if she were to get married, she wouldn't be entitled to her late
social
husband's pension
Social Security. Oh,
or Social
pension?
Security. Yeah, one of the
Yeah,
two. I don't know. And
yeah,
she's like,
yeah.
he worked hard for that, so we shouldn't get married now, and I need that. But once that time period passes, then perhaps we can get married. So that was the plan before, and I'm like, oh my god. Well, at least I have some time to convince him that what a total disaster this is going to be. And then little by little, like there started becoming, the honeymoon phase is over.
Yes.
He's not home enough, and when he's home, he doesn't even want to take me out to dinner, and now all of a sudden problems are
Well, the reality of life, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And there's
well,
a reason why my brother's has not gotten married at this age because he's really hard to live with. So I also told her, I said, you got to slow down. You got to really get to know him. You know, he's not perfect and he's certainly not perfect, but he also has, you know, just some really you know, things that are hard to live with. See if you can live with them first before you start talking about that word marriage,
yep,
you know. And
and
so, you know, things slow down, especially because of the fact that she wants to get her husband's late husband's, you know, whatever it is, pension or social security or whatever.
yep,
So that slowed things down. And now she's starting to realize, and then now conversations are like, I don't think I could ever marry him.
yeah,
So
no, good.
good.
But
I'm like, yep, see, you know, you see what I'm
it
saying?
and the good thing is, Lorena, is when you run into clients that are maybe they're looking to buy, looking to sell, you have some perspective now on different things. Not that you want to give relationship
Involved.
advice,
Right.
but you know, you can just say, well, if you do this, these are some of the things that you need to
Thinking.
discuss and be concerned about and talk to an attorney about, you know, because it's a huge decision. It's a huge
Yeah.
decision, you know, to buy a house, to get married, whatever it is, and or to sell a house, you know, and buy a bigger house,
Right.
you know. So and you know all the different um, permutations that can be out there. So let's well, let's do this. It's 9:30. Let's take a break because I don't want to start talking about freehold estates and then stop. I want to kind of go through that. So let's take a break. Come
Okay.
back in about 15 minutes, and we'll come back about 9:45.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great.
All
Thank you.
righty. You're
Okay.
welcome.